Chapter 2. The Worst Kid on Doucette. Her given name was Mildred Ella, but except for a few school teachers, hardly anyone addressed her as Mildred. Her family and friends, and later the world, knew her by her nickname, Babe. As an infant, the sixth of 7 children of Norwegian immigrants, she was called Baby. After her younger brother arrived, she became Babe, a name adopted by the neighborhood boys when she began to hit home runs in sandlot baseball games. Babe Ruth was a big baseball hero then, she recalled, and the kids said, "She's a regular Babe Ruth. We'll call her Babe." Raymond Alford met Babe at one of those Saturday sandlot games in Beaumont, Texas. He became one of her best friends. All the boys in the neighborhood would come and Babe was always there, he remembered years later. Let me tell you, she was the only girl, but she was among the first to be chosen. She was not just hanging around to the last. No, sir. Ordinarily, we didn't have anything to do with girls then. Babe was different. Once you saw her play, you didn't mind having her around. Babe could never pass up a ball game. One day her mother sent her to the grocery store to buy some hamburger for supper and told her to hurry. She ran all the way, bought the meat, and headed home. On the way back, she saw some kids playing baseball in the schoolyard. I stopped to watch for a minute, and the next thing I knew, I was in there playing myself, she wrote. I laid the package of meat down on the ground. I was only going to play for a couple of minutes, but they stretched it into an hour. Finally, she spotted her mother marching down the street, searching for her. "I got the meat, Mama," she yelled, moving out of the playground fast. "It's right here." She pointed to the spot where she had left the package. A big dog was standing there, lapping up the last of the hamburger. "Poor Mama, she couldn't quite catch me," Babe recalled. "So she picked up an old piece of rope that was lying on the ground and swung it at me. She whipped me all the way home with that rope. I was running as fast as I could to stay ahead of her, but she could run fast too." Babe's father, Ole, liked to boast that his daughter had inherited her athletic ability from him. But Babe gave credit to her mother, Hannah, who had been a champion skier and ice skater in her native Norway. Hannah and Ole had married in Oslo, Norway. Ole Didriksen was a seafaring man, a ship's carpenter, who had sailed around Cape Horn 17 times. One of his voyages took him to Port Arthur, Texas, on the Gulf of Mexico in the heart of America's booming oil drilling industry. Port Arthur offered plenty of opportunities for an energetic young man, and when Ole sailed back to Norway, he told Hannah that the Gulf Coast would be a good place to settle down. In 1905, he returned to Port Arthur by himself and worked as a carpenter for 3 years before he saved enough money to bring his wife and 3 small children to America. Hannah arrived in 1908 with the children, Ole Jr., Dora, and Esther Nancy. 4 more children were born in Port Arthur, the twins Lillian Louise in 1909, Mildred Ella, the future Babe, on June 26, 1911, and Arthur, or Bubba, in 1915. While Babe was growing up, her family name was entered incorrectly in her elementary school records. Instead of Didriksen, it was spelled Didrikson. She never corrected the error and later adopted the changed spelling. Family members felt that she liked the mistake, that it was just another trait of Babe to be or do something that was different. To accommodate his large family, Ole Didriksen built a house in Port Arthur that resembled a ship. But they didn't live there for long. Shortly after Bubba was born in the summer of 1915, a savage hurricane struck the Gulf Coast, uprooting trees and toppling church spires. Huge tidal waves surged through the streets of Port Arthur, flooding the Didriksen's sturdy, ship-shaped house. Rather than rebuild, Ole decided to move his family 17 miles up the road to the thriving oil refining center and shipping port of Beaumont. Babe had just turned 4 when Beaumont became their new home. Ole bought a 2-bedroom house at 850 Doucette Street in a gritty working-class neighborhood called the South End. The house wasn't nearly big enough for a family of 7 kids, and as the years passed, Ole kept adding on to it until it became the biggest house on the block. Doucette was a busy street with a trolley line running down the center. At one end of Doucette stood the sprawling Magnolia oil refinery, spouting steam and smelly gas from its many pipes and chimneys. At the other end of the long street were railroad tracks over which oil-filled tanker cars constantly rode north. Babe grew up with a crowd of barefoot neighborhood kids who made Beaumont's South End their rough and tumble playground. They hitched rides on the back of trolley cars and played baseball with mitts they got free by sending in Octagon laundry soap wrappers. And they swam in the Neches River, braving its water, moccasins, and treacherous currents. A short, wiry girl, Babe quickly became known as the local tomboy. She was a daredevil, always challenging the other kids to follow her on some reckless exploit. She would hang out at the railroad tracks with her sister Lily, her closest childhood companion. They would hop on a moving freight car, wait until it was moving faster and faster and faster, as Lily recalled, and then jump off. Sometimes we got skinned up, said Lily, but we never got hurt no worse than that. A favorite Halloween stunt among the neighborhood kids was to rub soap on the Doucette Street trolley tracks so the streetcar would slide and the motorman would have to slow down or stop. Then the ringleader, Babe, more often than not, would jump onto the back of the car and pull the trolley pole down off its wire, so the motorman would have to get out and replace it. Once Babe tripped and fell while she was running alongside the streetcar. She was nearly crushed under the car's wheels. Growing up, she almost seemed to court trouble. At Magnolia Elementary School, her antics often sent her to the office of the principal, Effie Pylan. One day, I heard the kids outside yelling for me, Mrs. Pylan recalled. I went outside, and there was Mildred, sitting on top of the flagpole. She had climbed to the top, and I told her to come down. According to her brother, Ole Jr., Babe's stunts earned her a second nickname, the worst kid on Doucette. Whenever a window was broken by a baseball, she was the one who got the blame. She was just too active to settle down, Ole remembered. She always wanted to be running, jumping, or throwing something. Everyone who knew Babe recognized her passion for sports and her fierce determination to win any game she played. She could run faster, throw a ball farther, and hit more home runs than anyone her age, and she took pride in beating the boys at their own game. She was the best at everything we did, said Lily. Babe and Lily would often race each other down the block, except that Lily sprinted along the sidewalk while Babe hurdled the hedges that separated the front yards along their street. There were 7 hedges between the Didrikson house and the corner, but one was higher than the others, and Babe couldn't get over it. She went to the people who lived in that house and asked if they would mind cutting their hedge down to the right size. They agreed. I'd go flying over those hedges, and Lily would race alongside me on the pavement, Babe wrote. She was a fast runner and had an advantage anyway, because I had to do all that jumping. I worked, and finally got to where I could almost catch her, and sometimes beat her. Like most of their South End neighbors, Babe's parents had to work hard to feed and clothe their family. There were times when things were plenty tough, Babe recalled. The toughest period came when I was still a little kid. For several years there, Papa couldn't get work regularly. He had to go back to sea now and again when he couldn't find any jobs in Beaumont, and Mama took in washing. The children had to help out, and all of them found after-school jobs just as soon as they were old enough. Babe mowed the neighbors' lawns and ran errands for the grocery store down the block. When she was in the 7th grade, she took a part-time job at a fig packing plant. She had to peel the bad spots off the figs as they came her way, wash the figs in an acid solution, then toss them back into the trough. Later, she worked at a potato gunny sack factory, sewing up burlap bags for a penny apiece. She was fast, sewing a sack a minute, and was able to make very good money for a schoolgirl. I'd keep a nickel or a dime for myself out of what I made, she wrote, and put the rest in Mama's sugar bowl. With such a large family, there were plenty of chores to be done at home, too. A big enclosed porch was wrapped around 2 sides of the house. It had 16 windows that had to be washed and a floor that needed scrubbing. That was Babe's job. Her mother insisted that there was only one way to scrub a floor, on your hands and knees. But Babe had her own secret method. When her mother wasn't watching, she'd tie the scrub brushes to her feet and skate the floor clean. whistling around like some ballet dancer on ice skates, Lily recalled. While times were often hard, the Didriksons had a wonderful family life, as Babe remembered. There was always music in the house. 2 of Babe's sisters played the piano, while her other sister played the violin. Her father played the violin too. Her brothers played the drums, her mother sang, and Babe played the 35-cent harmonica she had bought with money she saved by mowing lawns. We had a family orchestra going there on the front porch at night after dinner, she wrote. Other kids would gather around in our front yard and could see the lights going off in the houses all up and down the block as people got through with their dishes and came out on their own porches to listen. Babe's father was a talented storyteller. He loved to spin fabulous yarns about his days at sea, holding his children spellbound with tales about storms and shipwrecks and desert islands. What a bang we used to get out of his stories, Babe remembered. We'd huddle around him and listen like mad. I'm not sure to this day whether he was kidding some of the time or not. It could all be true. Things like that happened to those old seafarers. True or not, Babe learned the art of storytelling at her father's knee, and when she became a famous athlete, she did not hesitate to embellish her own accomplishments in order to impress her listeners. Ole Didrikson set up a gymnasium for his children under a big tree in the backyard. He made a weightlifting device out of an old broomstick with the flat iron at each end. And he put up bars for jumping and chinning and a trapeze for acrobat stunts. Babe and Lily pretended that they were in the circus. A neighbor who lived across the street, whom they called Aunt Minnie, had been a real circus performer. She would come over and show the girls how she could hang by her teeth and spin around. When the circus came to town, Aunt Minnie would take the whole bunch of us and show us everything, Babe recalled. Then we'd come back home and try to do the acrobatics ourselves. Anything athletic I always seemed to enjoy. Looking back years later, Babe admitted that she had not been an easy child to raise. Poor Mama, she explained in her autobiography. Once Hannah made Babe a beautiful new dress. The first time Babe wore that dress to school, she ripped it at the playground and came home with it torn and dirty. When Hannah saw the damage, she really blew up. She went after Babe, forgetting that she had sprained her ankle getting off the streetcar a couple of days earlier. When Babe saw her mother hobbling toward her on that swollen ankle, trying to grab her, she said, "Mama, don't run. I'll wait for you." Hannah came up to Babe, ready to spank her. Then she looked at me and began to laugh. She said, "I can't whip you." My parents were strictly sweet, Babe wrote, remembering the gentle blend of love and discipline that marked her upbringing. Some families don't show their love for each other, she added. Ours always did. As Babe entered her teen years, a rambunctious youngster who was not always accepted or understood, she knew that she could count on her family's unconditional love and approval. And with the warm certainty of their support, she had the self-confidence to try anything.